Welcome to this episode of Lead the Machine podcast, where today's leaders and tomorrow's talk about the human side of AI at work. I'm your host, Kirsten Marr, and what a treat to have today's guest on Lead the Machine, David Chaddock, an accomplished executive, and lucky for me, part of my family. David is my cousin. David is a trusted advisor and people leader with extensive cybersecurity and compliance experience across multiple industries, including healthcare, life sciences, energy and utilities, consumer industrial products, manufacturing and distribution, high tech and software, private equity, government and military, financial services, and retail. Whew! That's quite a breadth of experience to bring to the table. And it keeps on going. With his deep expertise in IT and operational technology security program development, compliance, governance, and third party supply chain security, David recently co founded the consulting firm Infinite Partners. The goal is to help his clients grow while keeping security and compliance in the forefront, which is no easy task. It requires strategic thinking and an aptitude and passion for solving complex business problems and establishing trust through honesty and quality delivery. He understands how to add value through automation and simplifying processes. It's amazing how complicated processes become in most companies over time. Every time we face a problem, we often just add to our process, and it becomes unwieldy before we realize the monster bureaucracy we've created. Reinventing and recalibrating how we do our work is a necessary part of leadership and strategy. It's particularly important now in the age of AI because data privacy and governance have a heightened focus for all industries. It's incredibly difficult to balance the need for keeping the organization and its customers' data safe while driving innovation on the leading edge of tech. David is a perfect fit for this work because he has seen it all from his consulting gigs 18 years at Accenture and 10 years at West Monroe Partners. He also did a stint as Chief Information Security Officer for Sema4, a healthcare AI and intelligence company. Best of all, David is one of the most genuine and heartfelt people I know. His integrity is non negotiable, and he's deeply committed to those in his circle. He's a wonderful father and husband and family member. I so enjoy his spirit, his dedication, and his wit. He has many gifts to offer us, and I know you're going to enjoy hearing his perspective. So, David, welcome to Lead the Machine. You've said your guiding principle is leave everything better than you found it. Where did that come from?
Okay. Well, first I want to say thank you for having me on. This is incredible. Really appreciate the opportunity here. So that mantra came out of necessity, similar to the good old phrase, necessity is the mother of invention. It really happened by default because a few factors: being the youngest, being disadvantaged in a way to get into
The
the
youngest of
workforce.
three kids. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So being the youngest, having to find a way to differentiate just there before even talking about the workforce, and then coming into the workforce. I mean, not to bore everybody, but what may be relevant to some of your listeners is kind of how I was able to navigate some of the early things in my career, and hopefully we'll get to how I think AI would have been a wonderful tool to have in my arsenal at that point in time. But leaving everything better than I found it just had to be a mainstay in how I was going to differentiate because I didn't have the advantages of being able to go to a 4-year school and come out of there right away and be able to have the recruiters coming after me. I had to go find them. I had to find an entry level position and find a way to work my way up because I was still in school where everybody my age was already coming out of a 4-year degree and getting there. So how was I going to differentiate? It was to be able to quickly identify a problem, figure out how to make that better than when I found it, and therefore be recognized by finding a problem and solving it before the next person, irrespective of how we both got into that room. So that's really where it came from and where it originated. And I found throughout my career that same mantra has served me well from day one of how do I get out of an entry level job and get my first big break. to, I mean, just this week, right? How do I navigate recent problems with phoning a new business? So that thing has always been my mantra. I don't think it'll ever go away.
That is so cool. And you're right, it resonates today because as I talk to a lot of people, millennials and Gen Z, for now, entering the workforce, this is where I think AI does not help us, is the job search is so impersonal and so hard. And so it's nice to hear that, it's always kind of been hard. And you always have to find a way to differentiate yourself, and working around AI tools is kind of the new conundrum, but there's always been a something to overcome in terms of how do you stand out. You're brand new, you don't have this or that qualification, you don't exactly fit the exact mold they think they're looking for. How do you get someone to take a bet on you, right?
Oh, 100%. And I think I think tech is both a blessing and a curse, but you hit the nail on the head. Like the mainstay thing that I don't think is ever going to go away. There's always going to be a human to human interaction. There's always going to be some sort of trust. There's always going to be some element of, do I like this person and do I want to work with them,
Mm-hmm.
irrespective of the skill set, right? AI and tech is just going to help you intensify and build on how you differentiate. But whether it's, my very first job and riding a bike and knocking on doors and meeting somebody, or having to go find the network of folks that are in the circles you want to be at, whether that be to get a new job or find the next client or get into that new organization where you're going to learn something, it all comes down to human networking. And that's where I think both generations can learn from each other, whether we're talking about the older folks like me or the new next generation of leaders that are coming up, right? That human element is never going to go away. It's just a matter of how you how you attack that, how you go about it.
So the first thing I'm going to say is when you say the older people like me, I'm older than you, so don't say that.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. The more senior folks will say it.
So yeah, that's right, right. Experience.
There you
Um,
go.
yeah, it's just a good lesson for all of us to realize that you're trying to stand out. You're trying to figure out how to carve your path. It's never been easy. AI does make it harder to be more personal, but it's just an obstacle to overcome, and we can overcome it. And you just perseverance, resilience, just keep at it, right? It's totally possible. So let's talk a little bit more about your background. You've worked, in a lot of very high trust, where it requires high trust and really high stake environments. So how has that shaped how you see the role of leadership today?
Um, I think I think just being in those environments, like first, let me address why I naturally tend to gravitate towards environments, why I tend to thrive there, and why I want to remain in those high pressure, high
Yeah.
regulated, high stakes environments. Um, I think that is just a matter of, that's where the fun is, that's where the innovation is, that's where the new, sexy, latest, greatest tech comes from. That's where I see more of the ideas that keep me and others around me motivated and less stale. So that's why I tend to gravitate there. So I see more action and be able to make more of an impact than, say, maybe something that is, maybe it's the wrong term, but more stable yet consistent, and in my mindset maybe a little more boring, right? So that's why I go there. That impact that's had on leadership, I would say it's forced me to have a crash course at many points throughout my career of, you need to learn very, very quickly how to navigate those scenarios that are high pressure with multiple stakeholders, and the consequences sometimes are people's jobs, livelihoods, and impact on their families. So you have to get it right. And I think the fact that you have to get it right has forced me to recognize good and bad leaders, which has allowed me to then take those traits and hopefully model them myself and try to develop more of the good and less of the bad. And what I mean by the good and the bad are, what are those leadership traits that lead to sustainability, lead to somebody wanting to put in the extra effort versus, it's 5 o'clock, I gotta go. those kinds of things. And I'm not necessarily talking about work-life balance. I'm talking more about the what keeps somebody professionally, personally incentivized, motivated to give you the best output. And that all comes down in terms of leadership style to providing opportunity, extending ladders, versus getting mine and taking it back and protecting my territory. I've seen that go wrong 1,000 times in my career. Those leaders make it, and then they stagnate, and then they leave. The folks that I see have long lasting legacy impacts are the folks that recognize they're not the smartest, that they don't want to be the smartest in the room, that they hire smart people not to tell them what. I know I'm stealing a quote here from Steve Jobs, but it's true, not to tell them what to do, but so that those people they hired can tell them how to change, and basically have that two-way respect of knowing that it takes a village and that any leader is not going to have all the things in the arsenal. So how do you continually motivate, incentivize, and keep people on the same shared goal track? I think that's really been the outcome of those environments, because you have no other choice. If you try to do anything in a non-collaborative style, it's going to fail. And when it's high stakes, the finger pointing happens really, really quickly.
Really
So
quickly.
really quickly, especially when you get up into those extra levels where it's like, okay, the board, somebody's head's going to roll. Um, People get very defensive and territorial. The folks that do it right don't. And they come into that boardroom knowing that we're all in this together, and they've already mapped out the shared accountability model, and they've already figured out the, hey, I'm good at this, but I'm not good at that. Therefore, I'm going to surround myself with somebody and I'm going to bring in the expertise I don't have. I think people get too hung up sometimes on the leader has to be the one that knows it all, and that's not the case.
It's
The
not the
good
case.
never.
You know,
The good leader is the one that recognizes they don't and knows how to fill that gap and
because
provide opportunity.
no one person ever is going to know it all. That's not even your job. There's so many important things you said there. One of the things that I want to highlight that you and I have not really talked about, but as I've been running data analytics companies and selling those solutions to, you know, very complex, highly regulated, high stakes companies, we figured out that asking the buyer, whoever was our executive champion and going to sign the contract, what's in it for you?
Mhm.
And there's a nuance to doing that, and you have to be very genuine, first of all, in caring about their business problems and them, but actually getting to the conversation where you say, hey, what's in your performance plan this year that this is tied to? And because if we know that, we know it's in your performance plan because it's important to your company, and we want to make sure you're the hero. In the company, we got really good at that conversation, and those were not only the most successful, but the most rewarding relationships that we had with customers when we could get to that level of dialogue about what's in it for you personally. Because it's not so hard to say, okay, what's your company goals and what's your company strategy? And this is a lesson for people selling a solution, but also for employees reporting into a boss. Like, think about what are they really tasked with, because their pressure is bigger than your pressure, and then their boss's pressure is bigger than, like it goes up that way. If you can actually really get to that, um, A, you're going to focus on the right things. B, you're going to have better relationships. And you're going to feel a lot more rewarded at the end of the day because you're going to succeed better when you can get really personal and human with people about what are we here to do? And at the end of the day, to your point, when you if something goes wrong and people start pointing, that's not the way you want it to happen. You want, if something goes wrong, we lock arms together because we've been in it together. And we say, yes, this went wrong, but here's how we're going to pivot, and and we're aligned. And boards are smart enough to discern that in a management team. Are they in it together or are they pitting against each other, right? And so they're going to give you more latitude if they see that you're in it together, and they're going to get more involved that you don't want in solving your problems if they see that you're kind of pitting. So it's just
Yep.
It's just such an important insight, that you brought up. So let's move a little bit to um, how we, think about if you're going to, engage in AI, you're engaged in advanced analytics, you're on the leading edge of stuff, and that means you're taking risk. So how do you balance innovation and risk? So when you're working with clients who are adopting AI or advanced analytics or looking at cyber, all the things that you work on, how do you advise that they start? How do you tie these tools to business problems and tangible ROI?
Okay. Love the question, and there's a lot to unpack there. I would say, um, you mentioned a couple things, right? Like analytics when that first came out, and that was the new thing back. I mean, like pick any example of evolution in tech, right? AI being the latest and greatest thing that's of topic and relevant right now. But the common denominator among all of these things is trust before we move forward. One of the reasons I focused and spent most of my career on cyber and compliance was because that was always the nucleus between all of these things that were new and emerging that would keep me motivated, learning. I don't want to ever become stagnant, right? So that's kind of why I chose that path. But each of those elements, no matter what the problem of the day is, how I honestly advise clients at the end of the day is ultimately comes down to the same things. And I'll first draw an analogy to sports. If you want to be great at any sport, any athlete that's been to the Olympics or made the professional team, whatever, is always going to have the same advice. You have to start with the fundamentals. And when it comes to AI, I see it multiple, many ways the exact same kind of situation where you mentioned it. Execs now, the board is putting everybody in under pressure to you need to adopt IA, you need to differentiate, you need to get this to the market soon. So speed to delivery is the goal.
Mm.
Um, the cyber folks, and me being a cyber guy by trade, are going to be risk adverse and going to want to make sure that we do things safe in a compliant manner. So to answer your question directly, my job when I'm advising clients is never to say no, but to say yes, but here's how you're going to do that in a secure, compliant, and responsible manner. And those three things are really important, right? They're uniquely different, but all come together. And I would say it's helping them recognize that there's a need to move. We understand that. Everybody gets that. But it's really getting them to understand that the traditional problem of cybersecurity advice has never gone away. It is much, much easier to be late and get that intro than to recover from a black eye of having done it wrong and trying to repair that reputational damage.
Mhm.
So we know that's going to be a very big, significant thing we want to avoid, a black eye. We also recognize AI is compounding and has sort of changed the game where speed to delivery is is more important than say it was 10 years ago,
Yeah.
right? I don't think the paradigm has changed. You still need to balance, but the need to get there quicker has changed. I'm not foolish like that. That is a true
Mhm.
factual statement. So we have to find that balance quicker and find more enablers. How we do that is literally you hit on it, finding the what's in it for them. So I will take human nature and use that as which may sound counterintuitive, but I will use human nature of the selfishness of people trying to get the end of the day. They want their bonus. They want to put food on
Mhm.
their table for their family, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's why everybody has a job. Otherwise, we'd all be Romans and just leisuring all day, right? So I understand that. And it's being able to break that down in the sense of recognize that everybody around this table has a selfish need. Let's not shy away from it. Let's put the cards on the table so that everybody understands what they need for them to call this new mission a success, whether it's adopting a new AI product or whatever that is, right? But it's figuring out the what does everybody need and what's that exchange. So bringing it back to trust, for example, it's recognizing that the data person may have an incentive program to, hey, you get this new product out, right? You're going to get a bigger bonus. They want to move fast. The security person is going to end up in court or fired or lose their job if that goes south. So they're incentivized to make sure that this is okay, right? Then you got the infrastructure person that wants to support both, but without any extra head or any extra budget, we're not able to do any of this stuff because we haven't addressed the fundamentals. So it's really just breaking down the same thing, applying it to whatever tech, but really breaking down the same fundamental thing of let's all be adults, let's all throw the cards on the table, let's understand what everybody needs to meet, and then figure out I can give you this if you give me that in exchange. That's how you come to the common ground, and then you can really map out a roadmap and objectives that are not just pie in the sky and oh, sounds great and the board's going to love it, but is it achievable? Mm-hmm. Everybody's got the backing of this because we all came up with it together. That's may sound like consulting fluff and duff, but it truly isn't. That is the key to what I see of if folks get that before they say, okay, let's take this initiative and adopt this AI product or go explore and evaluate or whatever. If they have those fundamentals down of how are we going to collectively make decisions? How are we going to collectively define success? How are we going to hold each other accountable? That's the key element to then you got trust. I will trust you if I know that you're in this with me, right? Yeah. It's how the military makes everybody shave their head and they all go through the same basic because they're all in the exact same situation. And if one person messes up, they're all doing push-ups. It's applying that same mentality, but not in a militaristic way, to a work environment, right? And bringing the human aspect back in of all humans are going to naturally try to get theirs. How do we get ours by each getting ours together?
Everybody wants to avoid the push-ups. There's no question about that. That's super painful. It's this artful way of balancing compliance and progress that is so important. And it's hard for people to sometimes put the cards on the table, right? People are, they're nervous about that, and you have to have trust as a team. And so you have to kind of work through some of that. But I think one of the things that AI is pushing, because it is so rapid, as you mentioned, is it's forcing more transparency. Because you can't, like you did, hold on to your own, and I know this knowledge, and no one, like those days, they're done. So, so it is, maybe creating an opportunity to get there in more companies than maybe, was possible before. As you go through that process with people, what do you find is like the often misunderstood myth about how security, governance, and innovation need to coexist?
I think that one of the most basic things that I still encounter, unfortunately, to this day, is people still view security compliance as the police and not the enabler or a differentiator. And the companies that are thriving and doing it right, that's actually the thing that is getting them new business. And I'll tie this back to a couple things, a trend we see very front and center lately, right? We do a lot of work in third-party supply chain security work where, say, for example, an organization is trying to get into a new market and they're trying to get a new client. And that client is now sending them far more security questionnaires, far more scrutiny, asking for more evidence of compliance with this, that, and the other thing. And that has all been like the adoption of that practice we saw evolve over a few years. Well, in the last 6 months, we've seen a huge giant step leap in the focus of those questions being geared towards how are these vendors, suppliers that we're about to do business with or potentially sell our wares to, how are they handling AI? Because I can have all the evidence in the world of they've done all of these traditional things. Then they take our data or they take one of our things or they're trying to deliver work for us and they put it in an LLM and it ends up in the wild. And that's way harder to uncover and unravel and put back in the bag. So there's way more scrutiny on trust practices, AI practices of the vendors that are trying to do work, whether AI is even in scope of the project or not. So having that extra scrutiny, like I see a lot of folks struggle with that. And then to get to the heart of your question, sorry, the misconception is still that it's police and stopping
Instead of enabler.
Yes.
And that you're going to stop me from moving forward versus, wow, it's almost like thinking about general counsel. Like, lawyers in a corporate environment, keep us out of trouble, but you can feel like, oh my gosh, they're going to squash everything I'm doing. Same misconception can be of compliance. They're going to squash, they're not going to let me. Instead of that partnership of like, this is the goal we're all trying to get done at the end of the day. Because even though different roles have different incentives, there are still company incentives that transcend all roles. We have to meet these many sales, this EBITDA, like you have to get your profit, you have to get your growth. So it's how do we get to that shared goal together? And boy, if I'm in product, I can't possibly release a product that's not safe, that's going to blow up in our face and create that press release nobody wants around, having some kind of breach or something. So it's reshaping how we think about our colleagues and the different purposes that we have, and switch the game to, okay, how are we all going to get here together, and how does each piece fit to grow versus everyone's just trying to stop me from what I'm doing.
And I would say there's another aspect of AI here that has compounded the concern with risk. So it's not just, oh, did my data end up in this LLM that I don't have control over? But if it did, bad actors can now use AI to do worse, more damaging things without being detected as easily with that data. So the concern, the impact is now, exasperated. Just for example, deep fakes, what used to be a very simple control that we would have for, hey, let's make sure there isn't a fraudulent wire transfer. You can't just rely on email. You need to at least lean out the office and say, hey, that was me. I do approve that wire, something. Well, now you can get a video, you can get a phone call that mimics that to a T. So it's compounding, and maybe that's not the perfect example, but
No, it's a great
AI
example.
adds on to the risk. So there's more scrutiny on it. I
Mm-hmm.
would also say AI can be used as an enabler. And the ones that going back to like, is this a stop gate or is this an enabler? The whole let's do this in a secure and compliant manner. Um, the folks that I see that are thriving and starting to take over market share are putting that front and center in their marketing material. They're getting in front of it instead of that next potential client asking them for show me evidence that you do this, this, and this. Security is now part of their, top three go-to-market value propositions in whatever service or product that they're trying to sell. Um,
Interesting.
so I'm seeing that shift, which is good.
What's your message to, executives who feel paralyzed, by the pace of AI or cyber risk? How do you help people that are just like, I just, it's too much and I don't know where to go first.
So the quite often my first gut, I was trying to real quickly figure out how to answer this question right. My gut reaction is that quite often the very first thing is just that human aspect of showing empathy and telling them deep breath. You're not the first that's gone through this. We've been through the rise of the internet. We've been through COVID. We've been through, every kind of restructure, reorganization that you can think of. Most folks in corporate for any long time have had. So they've seen disruption. They've seen change. This is just a new, different challenge. But we've seen advancements in tech come before. We've seen people not be ready. We've seen them catch up, and we saw how they were successful doing that. So again, I think it comes down to those execs that feel that they're pressed for time, still have their full-time job to compete with, right? We still got to address, all of the normal operations. We still got to figure out profitability. We still got to address, the tariff situation if you're in pick an industry right now. Like, so all of these things that are front and center, that this is just another thing on their plate. So awareness is just a huge piece of this puzzle. So the more forward-thinking groups now, even if their mission, the board says we need to roll out AI, we need to differentiate. What the good ones are factoring into that is upskilling. So it's not just training on the product that we're going to deploy. It's literally upskilling on a broader scale to make sure that let's not talk about this one tool. Let's talk about upskilling our entire team of how to use this tool, the next tool, the whatever, to not turn them into consumers of AI, but to be the in-company AI heroes themselves. So if you upskill and you show them a little bit of spark of the art of the possible, AI itself, along with if you do a good job recruiting, hiring, and getting the go-getters, that's going to be the recipe of innovation. They're going to figure it out. They're going to come with solutions and answers. Not all of them are going to be right, but if you now have 10 more options that you had before, one of them is going to work, or at least get you 2 steps ahead, right? And it's progress over perfection and keep moving.
You've talked about yourself as being someone that brings calm in chaotic moments. And there's going to be chaotic moments when you're on the leading edge. What does that look like in practice for you?
The best example of how do you remain calm in a very chaotic situation, I'm going to go using cyber and go to incident response.
Mhm.
When a company realizes, oh shoot, we've been popped and we're in deep doo doo, that is when everybody's true colors come to light.
Hmm.
That is when you see who can handle stress and who can't. That is when you see who is thinking strategically, who's trying to CYA, and who's trying to solve a problem. And I think that experience has, at least me personally, really, really helped me apply that same need to, like when we were as the incident commander, everybody in that room, that's what we were hired for. So you were looking at you to be the face of calm. You had to, I mean, I don't want to say present, you had to present that way, but you had to be that in order to really do that job successfully, right? That is taught me quickly, but allowed me to take that to any other situation where instead of a crisis situation, let me put it now in a story that many of your audience may find more relatable. We've we wanted to move. We did something with AI. We bought that product. We implemented this new chatbot internally. We've connected it with our internal policy. So now our employees can get quick answers, and we've reduced the amount of calls to the help desk or whatever by X%, and we're all patting ourselves on the back. Then they all realize, oh crap, our client's data is in this model. Or, oh shoot, it's now giving all of our people false information because we didn't get something right as simple as how do we prioritize how AI is going to determine truth? Is it going to go off of hits and the most searched item, which could be wrong? Is it going to go after the most recent version, which isn't always right? How do we know it's approved? We gave it access to the draft and the final versions, right? So it's those kind of questions that when people get 6 months in and they realize, oh shoot, that's when, again, not a crisis of, oh shoot, we're going to end up in the news tomorrow, but oh shoot, my job's now in jeopardy because the $3 million that we just spent, the board's going to ask me, do I have to redo all that again?
Yeah.
Or, hey, we didn't get the ROI because we didn't even define what our success measures and KPIs before we went going. So
Yeah. Well, so
have
how do
to
you,
apply.
yeah, no, I love that answer. And a lot of it comes down, I mean, there's so many people offering AI solutions. And let's be real, a lot of those startups are under the same pressure that the companies buying these solutions are under. And there's no question that companies get a little too far ahead of their skis when there's a hype cycle, whatever that hype cycle is. Right now, it's AI, and they claim um, more than they really have in production, right? You start to get promises of what they hope to deliver, not what they actually can deliver, in the moment, both from your internal teams and from a potential vendor. So it requires a lot of focus. And how do you help leaders kind of cut through this noise and figure out what's real and what's, a shiny object that we hope is real later?
I typically start by drawing on real world experience just to put it in perspective, and I use exactly what you just said. And I'll draw on experience from a decade of technical due diligence. And whether it's buy side or sell side, the M&A activity, regardless of what it is, right? For 1 year it was, oh, P's buying up every ophthalmologist out there. Then we're going after PT. Now it's AI and tech companies, right? And so forth. When you see the sim or the final management presentation from the seller to the buyer of, hey, well, here's what we have in production and here's all the investments we've made and all of our capabilities. And we usually get a hold of that first before we even show up. But when we're the ones that are doing the tech diligence and the buyer has hired us to come in and this is what they say, but can you lift up the hood, kick the tires, really do a home inspection and tell me what risk I'm really walking into here? It's I do have plenty of examples where there was truth, but almost at least 95% of the time, it's exactly what you said. The reality doesn't match the presentation. And there's obviously risk to the buyer in that. But I use that example to say, again, human nature, you can trust, you may have a good thing, but there's going to be some hidden detail that you're going to find at some point. So due diligence of that, not a buy of a company or whatever, but due diligence of whatever that project is, whatever that initiative, whatever that next objective is extremely important to figure out the details and the readiness. Like, what are you really starting with? So going back to fundamentals
Yeah.
of it.
And so knowing we're gonna find that everyone exaggerates, okay, it doesn't mean you don't have to work with that vendor or let that internal team move forward. So how do you help them understand, here's what's real, here's what's not, and this is still going to be a good vendor that's going to figure it out with you over time or not? How do you work through that final part of it?
Okay, so what you just said there, that one nugget of is this the right partner for you to work with? That
Mhm.
almost always comes down to after we deliver a report and you talk to everybody, when it comes down to, the one-on-one with the executive sponsor or whoever's really leading this thing and the management team, it comes down to that. It comes down to none of these players that you're looking at are really 100% where you need them to be. So who has demonstrated the will, the desire, the attitude, the aptitude to work with you, and who's been transparent in recognizing the gaps between the marketing material, the reality, and who's willing to say, we know that, let's work together to prioritize it and fix what needs to happen. That's almost always the answer, and who we see who picks who for which partner when we're going through, like, whether it's supply chain or M&A activity, who do they ultimately select? It's that longevity partner that's demonstrated the right characteristics. It's not always, and quite frequently not, the one that has the point in time most advanced
Hmm.
solution or on paper the best product. There's plenty of great products. When you want the white glove support because you want to see that evolve to meet your use case, that's where it breaks down. So the white glove treatment and the ability for that vendor to listen and throw the cards on the table, be transparent, that's the key element.
So, okay, so we go through this whole process. Executives are bought in, they know what they're getting, they know what they're not getting, they understand it's a process. Now it's time to involve their teams. Oh man, here we go. So now let's keep this on the AI track. And they're like, yeah, okay. So I'm worried about my job. I don't actually trust this. Um, you know, you didn't involve me. I'm not like up to speed and been in all these meetings and understand the process. So user adoption. When I'm running data analytics business, CEOs still say this is their number one challenge is resistance from the teams, user adoption. Worried about their job, not trusting the process, not trusting the tech, all kinds of reasons for that. So, how do you recommend that companies address this in a meaningful way?
So approach that with really two specific things in my arsenal. And one is going to be what's called the GOS framework. And what that is basically it's called governance, oversight, support, and perform. And it's a governance model that addresses the first concern that you mentioned of resistance of I wasn't involved. What's in it for me? I don't trust this. That GOS framework and the process of how we go about it gets the voice of those people heard before they are told what's coming their way.
Early,
Yes, early on.
early and
It
often.
it incorporates feedback from multiple stakeholders. So if it is a data initiative, all right, I definitely want to hear from the chief data officer, the data scientist, the analytics folks, but that's not all I want to hear from. I need to talk to all the other people that are going to support that because they're not going to be successful if the support and perform teams that enable them aren't doing their roles. So I won't belabor that point, but that framework is the glue and the tactical mechanism of how we get everybody to know what everybody needs, how we facilitate the what's in it for me and what I'm going to get in return if I contribute to this, how we establish accountability so that everybody can measure not just the success of the overall mission of we're deploying this new AI tool or we're adopting this new tech, but the incremental things along the way of how you get there. So each stakeholder in that governance model, how do you measure that they're doing their piece so that those dependencies are met, so that the next person can meet theirs, so that this shared objective is met?
Yes.
So the first thing is getting that stakeholder alignment, making sure everybody feels bought in, feel that they have skin in the game, feel that their voice is heard, because without that, you're dead in the water. The second thing there then is to focus what adoption means. Over the last 6 months, a lot of that problem and client ask has been applying a cyber problem to AI and AI governance. So what we've done is when we find that resistance, and it's everywhere, right? No matter what the initiative is, somebody at that client is worried about their job, or, oh, this is a precursor, I better update my resume because if it's not next month, it'll be in 3. What we've done is make sure that we focus the efforts and we drive them intentionally towards, let's not focus first on cost takeout and using AI to automate and remove a job. Let's get everybody in the mentality of, no, our first move here is to enable, differentiate, and provide something new that's customer facing. You're not replacing a job with that. You're going to need a job to support that thing. So you may streamline things. You may allow AI to do maybe a manual task, but the way that we approach this, everything is in the intent of showing the people that may be doing that certain function right now that this is going to enable you to either take ownership of a brand new thing, the functionality that we don't even have now, that wasn't even feasible, and its ability for you to move from your role to a leadership role of a new initiative, or it's you're now out of that mundane and going to a more strategic aspect where we want your human aspect, your brain power, not the paper pushing and the menial tasks per se. I don't mean that they're all menial tasks, but there's probably some that are going
No,
to get
there's just
automated
like
with AI.
there's things about a lot of jobs that people don't like to do, but once you take it away, they're like, what about my longevity? I imagine it's, it can be, something that a management team can agree with you on, but they're worried about the board pressure of the cost takeout. So, that's kind of that's definitely a process, right? But it's part of educating your board too. Like if we can streamline this process, instead of thinking about job reduction, think about growth and productivity in sales and so it's about how do we grow revenue and sales and then be able to continue to grow that without adding expense. And
Thank you,
that's with
Ian.
the board, right?
You described that extremely well, and I think again you're spot on, because literally sometimes we've had to just do the math on a whiteboard and kind of explain what you just described. And it's okay, we can focus on cost takeout, and you're worried about reducing. If you're trying to get your EBITDA up, you're trying to increase profitability. You got two options: cut expenses, increase revenue.
That's right.
And if we talk about cost takeout only, and we're focused on reducing expenses, that's what leads to the concern and all the heartburn from the workforce of resistance to where they're going to leave. Now you're adding on the costs of replacing them because you haven't yet solved the problem. You still need that human. So now your turnover has increased. You've lost knowledge. You've spent more, and you really haven't differentiated or gained any market share. So if we focus exclusively on all right, understand you need to have some, cost takeout or improve profitability. Let's identify a new revenue stream. Now you got people motivated. You're solving the problem, which is growth related as opposed to shrinking but protecting your EBITDA. That's usually the path, and we've been successful being able to find here's the customer facing. It often goes back to traditional consulting. Go talk to your customer, ask them what they wish you were providing. They will tell you, and then use AI to develop that offering.
So let's get into another sticky widget around this.
All
So,
right.
and that's messy data. So the opportunity to even do all this stuff requires massive amounts of data that you can rely on. And Just about every company has messy data to varying degrees, and data is hard. It's hard to solve. I mean, it's a luxury to think you only have one legacy system in larger companies. And you don't have to actually be a very large company. But then if you acquire companies, now you've got multiple systems. And if people think it's easy to integrate those, I will tell you it is not. And companies with this such increased intensity and pressure for profitability, boy, prioritizing data projects is really hard because they tend to take a long time and they're very expensive and in and of themselves don't have any ROI. It's what you can do with cleaner data, that gets you to the ROI, but you just do not have, the flexibility or, the appetite from your investors to say, in 5 years, it's going to be great. Like that's just not, reality. So let's keep it on the employee for a minute. How big of an issue is it when the people do not trust the data? They say that you haven't done enough. I don't trust this data. How much does it hinder adoption of the usage of AI and advanced analytics within teams?
A huge impact. I will say, in a former employer, I lived this firsthand, and we saw a lot of time, money, energy invested into an internal AI bot that was going to solve a lot of problems. And within 2 days, it was abandoned. Nobody would trust it because it was returning conflicting untruths. The data wasn't cleansed. The data wasn't ready. So the impact of that again goes back to similar to a breach. The black eye of recovering from that. The next rollout, adoption was a struggle.
Mhm.
First everybody was excited. They quit adopting because they saw that they couldn't trust it. The second one, they didn't trust it and didn't even try. So that, it's important to get it right. Excuse me. And I mean, folks are right to be concerned. I'm not going to lie. I have empathy for them, right? If you don't trust the data, and if you're the employee that's dealing with it, and your job is relying on it, I mean, people take a personal. Most folks have personal pride in their output. So if you're asking them to use something that they don't have full faith in, how long are they going to stick around and keep doing that? Like that's just not human nature. Nor is it viable to expect them to, just use AI and put in the extra work to do the QA that you shouldn't have to do because now you're second guessing a source that you should have trusted. And now you're spending more time to correct something that was supposed to reduce time of you coming up with that output in the first place.
At the same time, let's say a company gets it right enough, right? And the data is good enough to start a phase one to start to roll out. Even if the data is right, AI models, even with good data, have to be trained post rollout. And so, how do you advise leadership teams to explain that to their employees to say, listen, we got the data to this point. We're going to keep working on the data. The data is going to continually improve. It is good enough to start an AI rollout. But guess what? All of us are going to have to train this AI model. Do not expect it to be perfect out of the gate because there is not an AI model ever perfect out of the gate. The whole point of machine learning is that it learns, over time. I mean, what ChatGPT took 14 years to get to market. How do you advise leaders to be genuine and authentic to get buy-in and to actually get employees excited about training a model versus seeing it out of the gate and being like, yeah, this doesn't have any value?
I think it starts with a very open, honest conversation with not just the project sponsor, but with the consumers and the folks that would support and perform and do everything around that initiative to let them know that it is messy. It's not going to be perfect, but our guiding principles are progress over perfection. Let's start. We don't want to be laggards, but we're going to do things in a strategic manner. And what I mean by that is a couple things. One, I'm always going back to the fundamentals, whether it's AI or a new data warehouse or whatever the case is. I'm always going to be concerned with two primary things. Do I know where my data is? Meaning, do I have data classification of this stuff I know about? And do I have a mechanism to recognize and identify shadow IT? Because I can only manage and monitor and control what I know I need to manage, monitor, and control. So recognizing AI has changed the game, speed delivery has intensified. I have to, if I'm going to remain a relevant consultant, what's my advice? It can't be, oh, you got to do all these prerequisites first. So to answer your question most specifically, how we're currently handling that is finding the happy medium of here's a solution, twofold. We basically start with the now I'm gonna pick on your trade for one quick session, right? Because this is where I used to have like 10 years ago. This was the rub, always and always the constant thing. Data and analytics teams. I don't know what answer I'm going to need. Give me every bit of data because my job is to figure it out. So I want everything in that warehouse because I don't know what question I'm going to be asked, and I want to be able to do it, right?
Yep.
For us security
Not
folks,
realistic. It's not realistic.
not realistic and very, very dangerous.
Yes.
So, and then with AI, it's a very, very similar thing, right? What are the real use cases that we're really trying to solve? What's the value that we're trying to add? Again, progress or perfection. We're not always going to have everything defined up front, but if I have that conversation along with what it really takes to get the fundamentals right, usually where we end up is a place, and hopefully this is helpful to your audience, of recognizing there is a path forward. I can find a happy medium. And tactically, here's how we do it. We don't say stop everything, but we identify those use cases and at least get rid of some of the hot potatoes that we don't need. So de-risk everything we can. I'm not going to ingest that data because it's completely irrelevant. But if I want to set up some kind of AI product and feed it some kind of data, then even if I haven't yet done my data classification, and even if I yet haven't solved my total shadow IT problem, I can still keep working on those. But I can feed an LLM with anonymized data that is specific and I can fast track the path. If I can get 80% of them, that's progress, that's a win. Any board is going to thank you.
Honestly, 80% is usually like the winning. 100% is always like this race for perfection. And it's, perfection is the enemy of progress. What do you think the opportunity is for generations and different layers within organizations to learn from each other?
I will start by saying I think the opportunity now is greater than the opportunity was when I was starting my career, and I am envious of the folks that have AI at their disposal, right? So I get all the fear, I get all the concern, and yes, I have some of those too of what society going to look like in a decade. But we're at least in a 3 to 5 year period right now where it is an advantage to anybody, in my opinion, trying to either differentiate themselves if they're already in a company or trying to break into the workforce and advance their career. Leadership, in my mind, has nothing to do with who's at the top box of the hierarchy in an org chart anymore. The junior newcomer can lead now, right? And some more senior folks will gladly take that leadership in certain areas, right? So I think it's a recognition from both sides of the honest and factual statement that both have knowledge the other doesn't, and both need the knowledge that the other has. So I'll use a quick comparison to try to make this a real life story. Like when I'm trying to have a conversation with my teenage kids that, like all teenagers, oh, Dad, what are you going to tell me I don't already know? I already know this, blah, blah, blah. I want to go. It's sometimes just having to get them to stop a moment and try to put things into perspective that they see. And then I'll make the argument with them of like, do you remember when you were in 6th grade? And do you remember when you were in kindergarten? And I'll bring them back to that early life thing because that 6 years is a huge gap, right? And I'll just explain to them, what did you know in 6th grade that you didn't know when you were a kindergartner? And don't you think that you were smarter in 6th grade? And they will naturally, without a doubt, say, oh, yes, I learned, so many things. And then I just get them to understand, like, okay, now think about you're the new generation of leader and you've got a boss that has 2 to 3 decades on you in terms of workforce. They know a lot of stuff between the time of kindergarten and 6th grade that you don't, right? And it's that same thing. On the same point, there's been a leapfrog event that we didn't have to deal with in the past with AI, with folks being born digitally, like they're digital natives, as you mentioned. They're coming out of the gate with skills of just natural abilities of intuition and attitude aptitude of how to use these AI tools that most of us that were born before the internet just don't naturally have. Just like they don't have the experience of what happens when the board says no, what happens when things go wrong. Let's use this to both of our advantage. So going back to how we started this conversation and, leaving everything better, that I found it and what I think made me my leadership style, it's that need to have to hustle. I always had to hustle. I had to find an alternative in. I had to find a way to differentiate. Had I had AI, holy hell, I'd been like on a, maybe I would have retired 10 years ago and I'd have a yacht right now, right? So like if I
And an
was this
infomercial.
right, if I had AI at my disposal, when I was just starting my career,
Yeah.
I mean, you can solve so many problems. You can it gives you the ability to learn way faster.
Don't stop doing the hard work. Don't stop critical thinking. Don't stop doing things for yourself. AI is a tool, it's a partner, it's not a replacement for you. That's why I call this lead the machine. Do not let the machine lead you. It doesn't differentiate. The grit and having to pay your dues of having to have done this stuff yourself is still super important. We can all worry about the existential threat of AI, but if you're worried about that, well, then roll up your sleeves and get in and help define its guardrails. Get in
Bingo.
here and help us fix it. Don't just let it happen
Be
because
a
you
be a
have a
leader,
lot to
not a
offer.
spectator.
This has been so much fun for me. And I hope the audience, is really gleaning some great insights. So, David, thank you again for joining me. And this will wrap this episode of Lead the Machine. And we'll see all of you next time.
Thank you so much for having me.